Hi, guys. Welcome to Office Hours with Arrow, a LinkedIn live event hosted by Arrow leaders who care about what senior living looks like. Today, we're here to cover the topic of turning leads into move-ins. I am your host, Cassie Tweeten, Chief Sales Officer. I've been in sales with Arrow since 2008, so I've very short period of time. We've got Stephanie Harris here. Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Stephanie Harris, CEO. And actually, we trademarked the name "Turning Leads into Move-ins" for senior housing back in 2005. So I'm really excited to talk about something we're still living and breathing, over 20 years later.
Yeah, I love it. Paisley, you want to give us an introduction of yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Paisley DeRuza. I am one of the managing directors of sales. I started with Arrow in 2015 and have been with the sales team since 2017.
Well, hi, Paisley. Good to see you. Amy, tell us all about you. Amy, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm Amy Steinbeck. I work in the Kansas City market here. Before I was in senior living, you could often find me bopping around the city of Liberty. I was involved in a lot of committees and I worked for a church, and now here I am in senior living. I've been with Arrow for about 3 years, and it has been an amazing time.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Painful.
Yeah, we love it. Well, guys, we're happy to hang out today. We wanted to talk about turning leads into move-ins, of course, our longstanding kind of approach to leads, but we wanted to start the conversation with just some data, some stats. From the last little bit, I think we've been talking about this. This is a conversation we often have. I think we globally know that lead gen is up, right? Like across the board, lead generation overarchingly is higher. But I also think that the industry is openly communicating that conversions are down, which feels like a very interesting problem to have. And I thought we could come together to talk a little bit about, so Amy sits in one of our buildings as one of our senior living directors. Paisley and I have both sat as directors in buildings. Stephanie, of course, is the first director in the building. And so I thought we could kind of talk about this interesting moment in time in senior living.
Let's be real. I'm probably just the first telemarketer in the company. That's it.
And a really good telemarketer, right? Stephanie is great on the phones. So let's kind of have the conversation. What do we think is happening right now with seeing such a crazy lead gen, but then such an interesting kind of struggle in conversion? Any thoughts, Paisley, Stephanie, or Amy, as a person who's in the trenches right now?
I think it's interesting, from a building standpoint. If you look at the numbers prior to COVID, we were looking at around 300 leads that would come in this time of year. Since COVID, we're looking at upwards of 500 or more leads that are coming in the same time frame. So we're almost duplicating exactly what we had before COVID, but we have longer lead times. The average of that is running us around 2.5 years. So truthfully, we have more leads than ever before with the longest lead time we've ever seen. So we need to be thoughtful about how are we working with these folks? What are we doing to bring them to the next level?
Well, and I think one thing that you're saying too, Amy, is that like one of the most significant variables we experience from a margin perspective, everyone's right now trying to figure out how to grow their net operating income and improve their margin. One of the the fastest way to do it is actually to look deeper into your return on investment into your lead sources, and particularly the leads you're generating. Are you putting more effective resources at working those leads instead of squandering them? Which is, unfortunately, I think most of the industry, if we can't get it done in a 30-day window or a 2-week window, whatever the speed to lead parameters that have been put in place, some of that necessary post-COVID, we all had to recover. But there's a reality that's in the way of maybe the greater opportunity we have with this new lead generation. I mean, Amy, you hit the nail on the head. The fact that like half of your most recent depositors were a couple of years old as an inquiry. When we work with communities on our consulting side of our business, or we work through an acquisition or assume new management services, one of the more frequent things we see is those are the leads that got closed and buried, forgotten. Yet in our communities where we're thriving, building waiting lists, that's our bread and butter.
Well, and I think too, sometimes, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, whether you are a person who works with Arrow or you're a person in the industry who's just kind of chiming in to see what or looking in to see what somebody else is doing. I find it really interesting. And this is a conversation I know Paisley, as a person who has sat as a regional for us, and of course, as a person who sits in a manager director role, we are having conversations about buying signals. We are having conversations about what makes a lead really hot. And it's really interesting to sometimes be on the opposite side in those top 10 conversations about what makes someone a hot lead. And I think, Paisley, if you want to speak to that a little bit about like when we are talking with someone and we say, actually, your cold lead is a person who is probably closer to a decision than you might think, or why would we close this lead prematurely? I mean, any thoughts on kind of our conversations around that?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things. I think that we have to look at where we're at with the lead in terms of who we're communicating with. I think that tells us whether a lead is hot or not. Amy, we've had conversations about this before, but who are we speaking with? Are we speaking with an adult child? Are we speaking with who we would consider an influencer? Or are we speaking directly with the senior? That's going to tell us if somebody is a hotter lead or a colder lead. Seniors should be in the driver's seat, which I think that sounds like something that you feel like you shouldn't have to say out loud, but is something that comes up more often than not, I think, when you're working with people who are exploring the option of senior living. Also considering where leads are coming from. I think, Stephanie, you mentioned post-COVID or through COVID, we did have to do some of those quicker closes that more often than not may have come through maybe, say, a locator agency because a crisis has occurred versus some of those older leads that maybe inquired because they came in for an event a couple of years prior to learn a little bit about some sort of a continuing education series that we were hosting, or may have been curious of what was being built down the road, but then, has kind of continued to age and foster that relationship with us. Those are things that would tell me that somebody is a hot lead is how much do we know about them? How close are we? What does our relationship look like? What does that foundation look like? And it's not so much about just that snapshot in time of what crisis caused them to pick up the phone or come through the door.
And I think, Paisley, what you're mentioning too, the part where we get so wrapped up in the speed to lead, or we think that the sales cycle is so short, it actually creates the turnoff to somebody who's proactively looking at a move. It blows my mind. Like, we have a community up in Iowa that I remember at transition, like we had a what felt like a very heavy level of care, and just in a 1 year time span of time, to see the kind of residents that had moved in. Now you're 20, 30 new residents coming in with a refreshed perspective or sales perspective. It was suddenly like a whole different community. And I mean, ultimately, our physical real estate, for as much as developers and real estate experts in this industry think that that's what sells, it is still, it's the connection to people. It's still the search for the right place, is the search for the right people. And I think that if you aren't building a good group of residents that are being proactively, we're rowing out the lifeboat and saving before the crisis, or sort of the Noah's Ark style as we talk about, we're missing the opportunity to build a more robust community that sort of sells itself. Like, part of why I really enjoy it, I work on special forces with Amy, and Amy was also on my team last year on Back to the Basics, was my, I think I called you my ringer, and we worked on a few strategies, and you just kept throwing fish in a barrel for us. It was beautiful. I always enjoy working with Amy on those things. But Amy, I always am just fascinated that, because your community started off we actually pre-sold your community 100%. It has sort of sustained its occupancy. I mean, we're almost 8 years old as a community.
Yeah.
And the fact that it continues to serve itself because we put the hard work on the front end, yes, you might feel like a little blip that can happen in a moment in time, but such a little deviation from virtually 100% occupancy. But your community of residents is what I think is so cool. How I'd love for you to share that, because I think it wouldn't have happened had we not tapped proactively a set of people who have put you in motion that is creating that success.
Absolutely. One of the things about the Parkway that makes it so extraordinary is that we have a very large, probably about a third of our community at least, is all associated with one congregation or denomination of a church, and they've all served that church for many years together. We have a lot of leaders that have moved in. Honestly, one of them moved in and he just word of mouth has spread that good news. I can tour people from this church or even have a phone conversation with them and walk out of my office and 5 people are lined up to say, oh, did someone call you? Did this person call you today and talk to you about moving in? Are they coming? What's happening? A lot of times it's just that environment. I mean, who doesn't want to live with all their friends and people that they respect, and you have like-minded beliefs, whether it's church or politics or the things that are foundational. We are so much more than what's wrong with us or what are the reasons we need to move. And that's a lot of what we worked really hard to foster here, is that sense of community and belonging.
That's literally my favorite Nicely News episode. Charlie Johnson sitting in the driveway of the villas, interviewing these residents who, many of them went to college together too. Like,
Yes.
that was like, of the 20 apartments, I think like 12 of them came from this one friendship group, and we've since grown, even the connection from it. Like, that was powerful.
I think a reflection of that too is your wait list, Amy. You've got a group of people that have these relationships within your community that are, even if they're not living in the community, they're already building those friendships or continuing those friendships with the people that live at the Parkway, and are just continuing to foster that so that when they do move in, it's already a neighborhood that they know.
Absolutely. We've worked really hard the last few years, and I know the people before me also worked very hard to build a very proactive wait list. Like you said, Paisley, we regularly have people on the wait list who attend certain events, and we know, these people will be every Friday at happy hour. These people come every other week for dinner. They meet other residents, and they're already ingrained. They're willing. They want to be part of the community. This is the point, and they don't want to be strangers when they move in. Some of them have been on the wait list for an extensive amount of time, but just bringing them in and getting them connected has gone a long way. And it's really built some great relationships.
Well, I think Amy used a great word, and I think we just take a second to do a glossary moment, or so Amy used the term proactive, right? So when we talk about turning leads to move-ins, we talk about 3 types of approaching a person: a passive approach, a reactive approach, and a proactive approach. And I think so much of our sales process is about, and the focus for turning leads into move-ins is having those proactive conversations, talking to people in a way where it's a choice that they're making because they want to make it, or they make it from a place of being powerful. I think we would find ourselves in those turn and burn leads. That's probably more of a reactive sales approach. Somebody is coming in with an immediate problem, and we are solving that problem with occupancy or the ability to move them into a community. And then passive, I think we see passive take place when somebody's like, oh, well, they're not so hot in their crisis that or I really have to struggle to have the conversation, or I'm just going to send them an email every now and again and be like, are you still alive? Cool. Right. So I think, Amy, what you're mentioning,
the classic one, I'm just calling to see what's the update.
Yeah. And I think we talk about this a lot because we talk about the fact that the conversations we have are what creates the long-term relationship. And I think, Amy, you were able to engage with these people and show value and treat them as human beings. And they were like, here's the Parkway. They're going to treat you like human beings. They're going to create a relationship with you. There's value in this choice. And that's what I think continues to have people resident refer to you. And I think this is a great moment to kind of talk about the data, right? So we look at different lead sources, different ways that leads come to us, and how long they stay with us. And, a lot of our lead sources outside of local referral source or paid referral sources, they're going to stay with us for 4.8 months more, because we were doing the work differently than just that reactive kind of move-in approach. And so I think
not only less expensive to generate, is also going to stay longer. There's the secret to the industry's margin recovery.
Yeah. And we're not saying don't support leads that come in, but I do think that the people who move in are the people you put your energy into. And you've got a ton of leads that live in your lead base, long-term leads who were people who were looking at one point in time. And wouldn't it be lovely to actually dig into your existing lead base, build the relationship, and close that margin with people who are going to move proactively versus reactively? So I think, and if nobody has any other comments on that, I've got a couple of questions I'd love us to kind of get answered.
Ooh, see what they say.
Bring it on.
This is
Okay.
this is actually the roast of Amy Steinbeck. So
Oh,
Yeah. Good luck, Amy. Good luck.
Okay.
So
We need to talk about being a creep.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
yes.
Little inside joke.
So it is an inside joke. So for the class, for the collective, when we think about cultivating long-term relationships with people who need time to decide, what are tools we can advocate people use to cultivate those longer burn, longer term leads? Any just general ideas? Amy, you want to go first?
I was gonna say, sometimes it's just general follow-up with people. If you know they're gonna be a long-term lead, it's the little touch points. How did your doctor appointment go? How did the meeting with the roofer go? Hey, I heard you were in the hospital last week. Is there anything we can do to support you? Can I come by? Can I do some yard work for you? There's a lot of little touch points we can do that are outside just the, I'm calling for an update. I'm calling to see how everybody's doing. Just wanted to touch base. That doesn't get us anywhere. People want to feel like someone cares about them.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I want to add one comment there too, though, Amy. I think when you put some type of expectation that that makes somebody want to be a part of a next conversation with you, leaving a little bit of expectancy around information exchange or staying connected because you know some milestone or some event is going to occur, and the agreement that you're going to connect in this next point or this next point in time. I think too often people look at the sales process so rigidly as, I'm going to take an inquiry, I'm going to try to get that tour on the first phone call. And we push so far that, the odds are that we may get somebody to say yes to that, but the odds are even greater that people will say yes when we are a lot smaller and a lot slower and patient in the asks that we have, or in how we engage with individuals. Nobody wants to look at us. No one wants to be sold or feel like they're being pushed. And to think about in a first conversation, not everyone fits to then do do a tour. Not everyone is at that point in time, and I think we've got to expand that worldview. But it also applies when we're calling with leads, because the urgency that got me looking may not be present today. I may have to actually engage with them in discovering a little bit more about that urgency and what I'm doing today to make it not so urgent, and think about a future perspective on how to get ahead of that concern. It may not even be just these milestone moments. It could be, efforts that are reminding and kind of getting them to rethink, why did I look in the first place? And is that issue actually been resolved or not?
And I think to your point, oh, sorry, Amy,
Go ahead, Paisley.
I was just going to say to Stephanie's point, my thought when Cassie asked that question is that I approach interactions by removing the assumption that somebody has to move or is going to move, or that our community is the solution. And I approach the interaction from the place of, there was an issue at hand, or they're seeking some sort of a solution, and we are rowing that lifeboat out and we are helping them find that solution. And that solution doesn't have to be us. And I think that allows, at least for myself, it allows me to think a little bit more critically as far as, what am I interacting about? What am I, what next step, like Stephanie said, what am I touching base on that is going to mean something to that person?
I think it's critical too, when you're working with something let's be honest, senior living it's a big ball game. It's a lot to look into, and it's a scary thing to look into. Everybody imagines they're going to live at home for the rest of their lives. So the thing to remember, and I think one of the freeing things about being part of the Arrow team, is that when we go into those tours or those conversations, it never has to be about selling the community. It could be about, what is the best solution for this family in this moment of time, walking them through that and doing that with them. That at some point, if it's less successful, you're still there as an option, or at least as somebody that they value and trust to call and ask for an opinion.
I'll never forget not only driving a prospect to competitors, but also having to figure out what to do with their failure to launch daughter and finding her an apartment before they could make a move. So this is what it's all about when we say proactive. It means you're going to have to put in a little bit more effort. And it's not that we necessarily even need to, the fact that we're generating more inquiries, could be very harmful for us if this industry doesn't figure out how to approach and engage with these leads differently. But when it comes to the matters of heart, that's what the decision to make a move, that's where it's coming from. A proactive person doesn't absolutely need to make that change. but it's that tug of like, this could be a better lifestyle, this could be a better option, or all those things that feel like they're in the way could get moved. And that's our job. And in the role of the sales counselor is to, figure out how to remove those obstacles, or how to be willing to meet them where they're at in the moment and help try to address those issues or solve for the problems that they're raising.
Well, and I think a big part of it too is like just operating from a place of like empathy and thoughtfulness, because like ultimately I think one of the things that can be missed is, and we do daily top 10s, right, where we're talking about the 10, and Amy actually has a top 10 behind her.
I do.
But like it's a place where we identify people who are in the decision-making process or need to be a part of the decision-making process. And it's about being able to be empathetic and sympathetic. So I am an adult child, but not an adult child of a parent who is in decision-making. I am not a partner to someone who is making that choice, but how can I start to understand the gravity of the decision or what it might look like? And I think it's about making this not about an apartment to fill, but a person to support. And I think that's what can sometimes be missed in those black and white transactional, what's wrong with someone, can we fix it? It is talking someone through a change, a change in status in their life. And that's not black and white. That's not easy. And I think sometimes we make it that way, or we can make it that way. And it's, how do we hold ourselves accountable to make it what it is, a big choice.
One thing I would throw out of a comment is like how when residents do proactively move and can actually take advantage of the full benefits of senior living, that's some of the most excitement you can build in a community. I mean, like what sells a community is the feel, and that feel is created by residents that are enthusiastically making that decision. Like I've been in communities before where in consulting and the executive director would point to a resident who was disengaged or grumpy, who would be like, why are you here? And would tell me that because I'd be living in the community. They'd wonder, why are you at dinner with me? And they would say that the ED would say, well, she was put here by her son. Like that doesn't exist in a world where we respect dignity of seniors and we put the residents that are going to be moving in the community in the decision seat, even if they might have an impairment or something that could have in some cases caused or prompted an adverse decision or an alternative decision maker. It doesn't mean that person's opinion and feelings are suddenly irrelevant. They've got to still be central, but it just might be including a few more influencers on the decision. It's just not the end of the decision. The decision doesn't just change hands entirely.
Well, and I do think one of the things that we push, and I actually was having this conversation earlier with the team today, is like, it is our responsibility to question what would be considered the norm, because globally there might be a bias that like older people need this or need that. And it's almost like if we were just going to approach Susan, like Susan was a normal person and not 90, and we weren't putting all of this like bias on her being 90 to assume 90 means dementia, 90 means whatever, and we're just approaching Susan as a person who is in a place where her current moment doesn't make sense. I think that is an interesting kind of conversation to have. I do want to ask another question if we can, right? So I think globally across the industry, we are seeing stabilization, but we are also seeing communities struggling to drive occupancy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we've all talked about like filling your building the right way. That's what we're talking about right now. What advice would you give to a sales team struggling with occupancy, actively focusing on turn and burn leads or quick close leads to try to stabilize their occupancy? What kind of advice would you give about that? Amy, you want to go first?
Sure. I honestly, it can be nerve-wracking to have a lot of open apartments. You start that panicky feeling. But at the end of the day, follow the sales process. It's one foot in front of the other. And if we focus on the senior and what's best for them, what's the best neighborhood, what's the best option, maybe it's not us. Maybe it's home health. Maybe it's some repairs at their home. Maybe it's another community. But when we put them first and foremost in our search, whether it's a turn and burn or long-term, we're going to have better success and better longevity.
Perfect. Paisley, Stephanie, thoughts?
I think for me, I am a visual person, so I do think it's helpful to see the number, like the things that we're talking about right now, the data that shows that, the quote unquote turn and burn leads, they may be in and out of your community more quickly. And yes, we want to help people. We want to be available to all those people that need support. But I also think that if you can remember that you you would fill a building one apartment at a time. That's one lead at a time, and you can start to focus on one person start to finish. I think you're going to see more progress, and you're going to feel less overwhelmed by it. I also think that it's important to remember that if you interact with somebody human to human and just make your interactions intentional and from a place of wanting to help somebody, you're likely going to see more success. It just feels less overwhelming. So I think it's just a matter of remembering why you do what you do and what you're here for, and taking it one step at a time.
The only thing I would add to it is having a proactive process still can address the needs of a more reactive lead. So it's not uncommon that if you've been cultivating a relationship with a lead, when a lead suddenly becomes urgent, you're probably their first call. Mm-hmm. So you can't go wrong if your approach just has that little bit of a wider net and has a basic assumption that not everybody's going to make the move right away or at all. And when you approach it that way, you're not so focused on getting them to that tour or getting that deposit. You're more focused on problem solving, and then letting that, the means of doing that build and guide the relationship.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay. We're coming to a close. Let's do one last question. Okay. What is one of your favorite things or one of your best stories about helping a long-term or marathon lead make a decision to move into a community? Who wants to go first?
I will. So I'm located in the Ohio, Akron, Cleveland area. And there is one specific person that comes to mind that Stephanie helped me with for a very long time. And I spent many
exactly what I thought you were talking about.
many weeks, months, years helping this person. And it's honestly exactly what Stephanie just kind of laid out. Was we spend a lot of time kind of navigating all of the loopholes that would have prevented her from being able to move forward. We picked her up every single Friday. She would come, we would have lunch together. She would stay for our happy hour every single week. And there were just different things that we really had to navigate to be able to help her make this decision. And after, I want to say probably 2 years of this, a crisis did occur and a decision needed to be made. But because we had put in so much time and energy to be able to navigate those things, she's moved in. She is still in the community. When I see her, she cries because we just love each other. We have the best time. When I met her, I was not married yet. I'm now married. I have an almost 2-year-old. She looks at pictures of my daughter every time we talk. Awesome. And she sends me Christmas cards. And it's just like, it's those relationships that make everything worth it. And I think that it just remind me why I do what I do, because it's just such a fulfilling feeling. And one year I got a Christmas card from her that just said, "Thank you for helping me like where I live." And that means the world to me. So she is my story, but she has left an everlasting impact on my life. So
Cassie, you got to tell yours.
Oh, well, what do we want to tell the Reynolds, or do we want to tell the Bushes?
I was thinking the latter.
You're thinking who?
The Bush. Yeah. Bushes.
Yeah. So there was a couple that I met, and they were just the sweetest couple. They dated for 6 weeks, and then they got married, and they had the best story. And I courted them for 2 years. And then the kids kind of gave a push that they needed to make a move, and they moved in with us, and they actually attended my wedding and gave me their 15 wedding anniversary china for my wedding. And they just said that like the kind of life they were able to live once they moved in with us was just exponential. And they're in our Christmas music videos. They lived with us through passing, but they were able to have like 8 to 10 really solid years together as they were both kind of aging through it. And like, that's why we do what we do. Like, but it was like, we courted. I was there almost every week. When we talked about just normal human being things that you talk to people about. We didn't make it about their age. We didn't make it about what they needed to do. We just made it about human connection, and it made a big difference. Okay, guys, we are officially a minute after. I feel like we got to come back and talk about this again, though. I think we did it. Amy, congratulations on your first time at LinkedIn Live. And guys, we will see you next week. And who knows what we're going to talk about, but we're excited, and we hope we're going to see you there. Bye, guys.
Thank you.